And we definitely talk about it a lot in trucking, whether, broker fraud, these things. Just recently, I think of last month, some FMCSA representatives came into OIDA for the board meetings, and we're talking about this type of issue. And a big part of the discussion was that, yeah, we know this is a problem. We want to do this, but our hands are tied. We don't have the ability, the jurisdiction to follow this issue or to do that. Well, a big part of what this bill would do is give FMCSA some teeth.
And we're back, looking back at another busy week, trying to remember all that happened in trucking. Joining us with some reminders and some analysis along the way, Mark Schremmer and Tyson Fisher of Landline Magazine. Good to see you, fellas.
Good being here. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So we got a lot to get to. Let's jump right into it here, starting with this new bill in the U.S. House. It's called the Household Goods Shipping Consumer Protection Act. The name a bit misleading, Mark, in some ways, but the takeaway here is that it would give FMCSA a bit more power to go after all these fraudsters we're seeing out there come out of the woodwork.
Yeah, I mean, right now, if you really think about it, we're kind of in the era of fraud, whether we call it broker fraud, freight fraud.
The era of fraud.
I mean, it really is. I mean, cargo thefts are going up. Yeah. I mean, all of these sophisticated schemes and different things. I mean, even, the just general public, you get a text on your phone, it may be a lead into some sort of scam. There's all of this type of stuff going on. And we definitely talk about it a lot in trucking, whether, broker fraud, these things. Just recently, I think of last month, some FMCSA representatives came into OIDA for the board meetings, and we're talking about this type of issue. And a big part of the discussion was that, yeah, we know this is a problem. We want to do this, but our hands are tied. We don't have the ability, the jurisdiction to follow this issue or to do that. Well, a big part of what this bill would do is give FMCSA some teeth, some ability to actually put out some civil penalties, to watch out, against registration. You have to have an actual physical address, that to be able to, before you could get registered. Those little steps could go a long way in helping this problem.
Yeah, and as I've said, this is a no-brainer. It should be a no-brainer. It's bipartisan, the bill is already. We've got trucking groups getting on board already, OIDA among them, supporting this effort. And really, people need help out there. They need people to make other people accountable who are stealing money from folks. And hopefully we'll see some momentum on this, because it really is a no-brainer. I mean, there's no reason for not pushing this thing ahead.
100%. And one thing I will say, like I said, to give FMCSA credit, they were correct. Their hands were tied in some things, but also frustration from truckers on a lot of this too is one place their hand has not been tied is an existing regulation on broker transparency. That has been there on the books for decades, yet it's never been enforced. They accepted a petition from OIDA all the way, they accepted it last year, but the petition was all the way back in 2020, and we're still waiting to see that proposal for them to actually do something about it. That would be another huge step, in this process. But this is a positive thing, and hopefully we can get this passed.
Absolutely. Let's shift to the courts here, which is where opponents of the EPA's new emission rules for heavy trucks hope that this broader war, so to speak, is won. We've got lawsuits coming out of everywhere, Tyson.
We do.
What's caught your eye here?
So, about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, two lawsuits dropped on the same day. This is a charge led by the Nebraska Attorney General. And it's basically, call it what it is. It's Republican states pretty much challenging the Biden administration's emission standards. And so the first one, the biggest one, is a federal lawsuit against EPA's new truck emission rules. That's the new emission rule that was finalized in April that essentially will make it's mandatory for, I believe it was 25% of sleeper cab tractors to be zero emissions by, I believe it's 2032.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean that went along with a similar rule with passenger vehicles, which there's also a lawsuit against that. But so yeah, 24 states are basically challenging this lawsuit, and so what they did was they filed a petition for review in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit. So when they filed that petition, it didn't lay out the details of the argument. That's to come at a later date. But essentially what they said was in the press release is that they're going to basically argue that this rule is arbitrary, capricious, an abuse of discretion, and not in accordance with the law. Pretty ambiguous, but we'll get more details later as that goes. But yeah, I mean, this is something that we knew was going to happen.
Yeah.
And so it's just a matter of when, not if. And who was going to file the lawsuit? Was it going to be the private sector or the public sector? And it looks like in this case it was 24 Republican states decided to lead the legal charge on this issue.
Which quick math is almost half of them.
It is almost half, right?
Yeah, and we've talked about this before, and I imagine we will see some private entities file lawsuits as well. But if there is going to be a path toward defeating this thing, as we've talked about before, it's probably going to be the legal process.
Right.
And that process is now beginning.
Right.
This is going to be, to use the word process one more time, this is going to be a long process.
It is.
As we know, the legal process does take a long time.
Right.
But we're taking those steps.
Right. And this, so on again, the same day, there was a challenge, a legal challenge against California's Advanced Clean Fleets regulation. This one, again, led by the Nebraska AG, about 16 states in this lawsuit. They're trying to undo a regulation that requires certain fleets to go basically all new trucks have to be registered, and those new trucks have to be zero emission. This affects drayage fleets and fleets with more than 50 vehicles right now. So that is actually the third federal lawsuit against the Advanced Clean Fleets. I believe the California Trucking Association was one that filed. Then a Chamber of Commerce filed another. Not to mention, so that's three federal lawsuits, and there's a fourth state lawsuit that was filed by the Western States Trucking Association. That one's pretty well challenged.
It's good to see the attorneys getting some work, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
They don't get enough, right?
Good for them. Yeah. Yeah, this is going to be something, obviously, that we're going to keep an eye on over the coming months and, honestly, probably years here
for sure.
as these trials and lawsuits kind of play out. But we'll keep an eye on that, and we'll see where it's headed, but clearly a lot going on there. Next up, Mark, the final meeting. I know we've been talking about this advisory committee on Underride Protection for several months now. To say it has not been a smooth process might be an understatement. I know they've had quite a few issues in terms of procedures and whatnot. The takeaway here is that the final meeting is beyond us now, or behind us now.
Yeah. They finished the final one this week. That they have basically about a month to file their report, and I'll actually put parenthesis S there, reports, and I'll explain that here in a second.
Yep.
When I talk about this topic, first thing I always want to do is make sure it's understood. The sympathy and empathy that there is, on this committee. One of the reasons that this has been so contentious is three of the members, I think it's like a 15, 16 person committee there by the end, and three of the members have lost loved ones to these types of crashes. So you can understand the emotions and everything that goes into this. Yeah. But there are a lot of issues. That Doug Smith, OIDA board member, is the only actual trucker that was on. And for him to, he's been, I feel like watching it like kind of a voice of reason through a lot of it. He definitely has that empathy that we talk about, but at the same time, explaining the operational hurdles and the cost and the different things it would have. But throughout this whole kind of committee meeting, there's just been a divide, and you could tell that there were a lot of people that already had decided what they wanted to do before any of these meetings took place. And now, and this is the first for me, I've covered a lot of these type of advisory committees. At the end of them, what they typically have to do is come out with a report that they give their list of recommendations to whatever agency. In this instance, it's NHTSA that they have to provide the recommendations. This is the first time I've ever seen that it's going to be like Supreme Court style, where you have to, where they have the majority opinion, and then they have the dissenting, or they're calling, been calling it the minority report on this. So it's just, there's a lot of emotions. It's been, it's not really been fun to cover either, because it's an emotional thing, hearing all of the arguments back and forth. But yeah, I hope, cooler prevents hell. Everybody there wants, fewer of these types of crashes.
Of course, yeah.
And just fewer crashes in general. And that's part of the issue too, is that some of the things, there are questions, okay, do we create this guard that helps protect this crash, but does it actually cause a larger crash, because now the car is bouncing off and creating a huge pile up, and so there's all these types of issues that have to be taken into account, and so we're about a month from seeing the reports.
Yeah, and again, it's been. It's understandable, as you mentioned, that people are not moving off of their stances, but there's a practicality issue here as well that I know Doug Smith has talked about a lot, trying to inject some of that into the discussion. People, have not necessarily been accepting that as much, but we'll see what happens with this final report, which will come out, as you said, in a few weeks here. I want to talk about one thing more, and we have got a few minutes to talk about it. Marijuana, trucking. The DEA made this move that would recategorize marijuana as a Schedule III drug, basically making it less serious, which is going to take some time. But your takeaways as we talk about this in the context of trucking, Tyson.
Right. So, long story short, we don't know. So we're done.
All right. Now, we only got 2 minutes to fill. Let's talk about baseball, I guess. Huh?
No, but to be clear, rescheduling does not mean legalization. It just it makes it's less restricted in terms of this regulations. It mostly will affect the immediate effect deals with taxes, with dispensaries and stuff like that, and it makes it easier to research marijuana. But as far as federal regulations with drug testing with the DOT and FMCSA, what we do know now, just based on the notice of proposed rulemaking, is that there will be no direct immediate effect. So the testing for marijuana will continue, as far as we know right now. This is the very early stages of our rulemaking, and so right now we're in the middle of the 60-day comment period. So the whole point of a rulemaking, or the proposed rulemaking, is that the agency gets all of the information from stakeholders like the trucking industry, and they'll compile all that information, and so by the time we get to the final rule, which may be a long time because this process is not a quick one, we might get more information or more guidance from the DOT or FMCSA what this means. But at the time being, all that we do know is that the status quo will remain for the trucking industry, and that's probably a good thing for now, because there are a lot of questions that need to be answered. Some of which are when it comes to impairment detection. That's the biggest one right there. We need to get that figured out. So, a lot of questions need to be answered, and I think during this process we will get more clarity. But until then, just expect marijuana to continue to be illegal for truck drivers.
Yeah, we've seen this huge cultural shift, within the states as well. So we knew this was coming.
Yeah.
What we don't know is what this is going to mean for, as you said, trucking and a number of other industries as well. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Mark, Tyson, we'll have to leave it there, but we'll see you, I guess, in a couple weeks probably again. And
Yeah,
we'll
we can
talk
talk
again.
about baseball next time.
There you go. All right, sounds good. That was Mark Schremmer and Tyson Fisher of Landline Magazine. You can check out their work on landline.media every day and in every issue of the magazine itself. We'll step out for a quick break, but hang tight. There's more Landline Now right around the corner.